Hey guys, it's Shawn Ziem, the host for the Webtalk Legends Podcast, where we bring guests on who share their story and we learn from them, from all the value that have happened in their past. It's things that they had trials and tribulations, things that have happened to them that they're able to battle through and have that opportunity that comes, that golden nugget that comes out later on. So I want you to sit back, guys. Those that are popping in now, those on live, the least you can do right now is just drop a comment, hashtag live. On the replay, hashtag replay. Now, those that like to sit back and listen, that's great. We like engagement. Use the emojis, a pound, thumbs up, what have you. And also drop a comment where you're watching us from. If and when you really are into this and you want to ask questions, drop the questions. We might have time during live. We might have it definitely after the replay. So make sure you are here for 30 minutes. You're engaged. You're learning. We're going to make sure the value is brought. And I'm going to bring some fire here with my next guest, Sam Mena. What's up, brother? How are you?
What's going on, Shawn? How are you, man? Thanks for having me on here.
Thanks so much for coming, man. This is going to be fantastic. I haven't seen you in a while, man. This is great that we can reconnect.
It's been a while. I mean, a very purposeful hiatus from a lot of things, and I'm glad you reached out, and I'm very blessed and honored to even be a part of it.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Again, those that are popping in, don't forget to hit that like button at the end, hit the share button, and ask questions, engage us. We want to make sure you're present with us as well. Sam, I love hearing it from the guest's mouth. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, I am Sam the Lion Mena, and I am a team mastermind when it comes to real estate. I currently am brokered by Keepsake Realty in Union, New Jersey, under Andrew. And so that's what I do. I really focus on empowering, educating the community on understanding generational wealth and also focusing on every aspect of wealth in their lives.
Love it, man. And a lot of people are like, oh, another real estate agent. It's not that, man. This is a show that you're going to gain some value. I always bring people on that are business people, and I want them to get a little shout out because they're going to learn lots of things. And for those that don't know, this is a global podcast. We have greetings from Morocco. So those that are popping in, I love how people follow directions too. They drop those comments. So let's get back and let's rock and roll. So, Sam, we haven't seen each other in a while. You said a couple things before we went live that really resonates with me and helping men out there and mental health. How can we help more? What are some things that's in that mind right now? You're thinking about how we can collaborate with them.
So obviously, it's not a unknown that I took about a year and a half hiatus from real estate and probably even going live in social media. I went through a couple instances in my life that were a little bit more personal, right? Between losing a brother to marriage issues and then my son being born 26 weeks. So I took a big hiatus. But in that transition, I found a place. Well, first off, I found myself needing more of a guidance, and I ended up finding a place where we focus on truly transforming the man's life. And Pastor Anthony, and obviously he wrote a book called Transform, which focuses on getting men unstuck. And I've kind of used that into a platform for myself, right, to also spread that word to others. You see, the problem is, especially in real estate, you get so focused on the gaining of the financial wealth, you start losing other aspects. So I think it's really important to bring back that piece back into the manhood, right? And to bring back into men to really focus on the other parts of it. He speaks about 4 quadrants of spiritual, physical, relational, and financial. And I'm a previous to finding Pastor Anthony, it was something I was talking about, right? About really speaking into what really wealth means for people. But I've been really focused on really bringing this to the men as something a little bit on the lines of what I want to like to focus more on those conversations. Because you know what it is? I think it feels society has gotten to the point where they haven't really it's hard for a man to really show some type of emotion without being demasculinized, right? And men don't cry, right? And men don't show these emotions. And unfortunately, it's been that stigma that hasn't allowed truly the development of a man being present, right? And I love saying this one, right? When a lot of wives say, well, my husband is like he's emotionally broken. Well, when he's expected not to cry, that's an emotion. And he's emotionally broken. Well, I mean, it makes sense, right? Because that was his upbringing. A lot of the issues that we as men go through, and just people in general, a lot of it has to do with childhood, right? Or some type of situation that happened, our upbringing, sometimes circumstances, and sometimes it's just finding what that is to get unstuck. Shawn, obviously, I know a little bit about your story, and I don't want to really go into that depth, but it's remarkable how you can see the other side, right? Everybody sees the story, sees the glory, but doesn't know the story, right? They'll see your triumphs and the blessings, but they would never see exactly what got you through there, right? It's the desert that makes the man. It's not it's not the current instance or where they're at, right? It's humbling to know that you're not alone.
Yes.
And I would say this is one thing that I always thought I was alone going through this, but when I stepped into this place and most recently in June, we had our second retreat. It's called 252, the weekend, and we had over 400 men take off from Thursday to Saturday, and we're just in this place in Iroquois Spring. It was literally a remote campsite. 400 men just being vulnerable, being open, and not only were they able to be vulnerable, be open, but they became unstuck a little bit, right? They were outside of the phones and the internet and all that, and they were just amongst other men, right? Seeing young men go through the rite of passage, over 60 young men go through the rite of passage, something that our ancestors always spoke about, and to see these kids go through the rite of passages and then their fathers kind of embrace them, and that's that fatherly aspect, that they're, statistically speaking, there are less children being raised by dual parents, right? Or if they are, there's shared custody or something like that. So the fact that you can start seeing the father being a father for the child and bringing that back to the household and giving them their place, it trust me, wives, you won't be mad. And my wife could attest to that, right? I'm not the same man that my wife and I were close to divorce. We were literally, my wife was filing. But God's so good, right? Our marriage is not only restored, but we had our first kid.
I was hoping you were going to say that. I was like, oh man, I have some things to unpack, and I'm like, I want him to say something.
Yeah. So it's the man that I was when we first got married 8 years ago to the man I am today. It's completely different. I know it. I feel it in myself. People acknowledge it, but the fact is that I could see her acknowledging it, right? A person that was running away from our marriage is not running from it, but embracing it, right? And we're going through it and in a great way, in a healthy way. But
like
it's also
how did you come about, fixing or correcting? Was it something that you were communicating amongst both of you, having a sit down and this is what's on my mind, this is what's on my mind? How did that work?
It actually was far from that, Shawn. My wife really was adamant that it was not going to work out at this point. And I really stayed into what I had to do. Obviously finding the church was in itself supernatural, right? But then going through the process, it was more of her seeing it happen, right? It was her seeing it unfold. It wasn't words, it was more actions. And
right.
It kind of got her to that point where she's like, wow, like you really are not the same man. And get me wrong, listen, we all go through our struggles, right? But it's acknowledging certain things and finding the community of accountability. And I'm going to say that again, the community of accountability, right? Because you could find a community that will never hold you accountable, or you can find a community that will always hold you accountable. And that's something that I found, right? I found other men that will hold me accountable and call me out, when they see certain things, or when I was having a struggle. And listen, I was, at one point I was trying so hard. I was like, please take me back. And in reality, and then I had to learn it doesn't happen, right? And it's something we forget about marriage. I was asked by a pastor, he goes to me, how far are you willing to fight for your marriage? And I said, whatever it takes. And he goes, the right answer is till death. And I never really realized that, right? Because we grew up in a society where divorce is such a focus, right? It's I grew up, I have divorced parents, right? We have, it's very common. But the fact that when you're willing to fight for something so much till death, it's when it really means something. And yeah, my wife got to see a different side of us, right? You know, in 8 years that we've been married, we never even tried to have children. And it just happened, right? And I believe it happened at the right place at the right time, right? God's timing. Because we lost a child in 2020, right? And we thought that was it for us. We're never gonna have. We were okay. We had accepted it. But I believe that everything that we went through in those 8 years built us, created us to become the pillar that we became, to go through what we went through in that season of our son's birth.
Now, lots to unpack here. And those that are just popping in, definitely drop a hashtag live if you're on the live, hashtag on the replay. Now, you have one thing I want to unpack first is you have those 4 pillars. You said spiritual, you said financial. What were the other 2?
Relational and physical.
All right, relational and physical. Okay, cool. Now, you also had a death. You had a baby who was born 28 weeks early?
26.
Or 26 weeks. And then marriage issues, which we already covered. Now, and then with the church and you finding yourself, it seems like, because there was a reflection happening, was the death or the possible divorce the push to go into the church?
So Bob, my wife and I, we were both, Christians, right? We were Christians. I found, I became born again when I was about 9 years ago when I first met my wife. We were both Christians. We were both leaders in the youth, right? We were youth ministers at one point in 2 different churches. My wife is a worship leader. So it's something we've always been involved, but we had walked, when I got into real estate, really hardcore and did it and kind of disaligned myself a little bit from the church. That's when we saw all the issues. I will tell you, I think that the brink of it all it didn't happen until 2 months after, about a month and a half after my wife left the house. But it was a culmination, right? I had never really grieved my brother. And then I found myself in a moment of, the first month, it was, my wife left the house. It was like, everybody was taking me here and there and going out here, going out there. And it was kind of like trying to distract me from the reality. And once reality struck, man, I went through a very depressive mode. And if I could be very frank with it, I had a moment where it was a Wednesday night. I started drinking in my own house. And I literally, I tell this part of my testimony, I literally heard the voice of the devil say, just join your brother. And somehow I woke up the next morning and a person that we both know, right, in the industry, she calls me at 7:00 in the morning and says, God just told me, I need to call you, see how you're doing. And what that opened was a can of just restoration and surrender. And then I'll say that's what it all came down to, right? And then I kind of went a little bit live on some social media platforms, and somebody's reached out and they gave me a book. And come to find out, that book was Pastor Anthony's book, Transform. And when I got that book, I got excited. I was waiting for it to come in, and my wife and I started speaking here and there. It was more about let's get ready to get divorced, right? Let's go file this and that. The day of my birthday, March 27th, I received a message from this friend of mine. It said, hey, text this number. They're having the pastor that wrote that book. He actually has a church here locally. And they're having a 252 night. You should definitely sign up for it. So I told my wife a little bit about it, and then come to find out, it's actually the same church my wife had been visiting for the last month.
Wow.
And the first thing she said is, I don't want you to go there. You can go to the men's thing, but I don't want you to go there as your full-time church. I had already started going to another church. And I show up to a 6 a.m. prayer, men's prayer, man. And she told me, you better not go. Right? She's living somewhere else. And I go to the 6 a.m. prayer, and I had never walked into a place where men embraced the way they did. And I'm talking about close to 50 men were just sitting there in the lobby, hungry to pray at 6:00 in the morning. And not only that, but at 5 a.m. they had the workout, and the pastor himself was there working out with these guys. I've never been to a church where a pastor's physique was like, it was intimidating, because I was like, man, this man is 40 something years old and he looks great. He's in the best shape, and most of the guys are in the greatest shape of their lives, and then it kind of all came to it, right? To see all those quadrants. I believe it was, asked the question of what was the tipping point. I believe it was all leading up to it. Through my walk, and I learned this from a pastor friend of mine. He literally said there's three different phases in our walk, right? There's the encounter with Christ, right? And then there's the full engulfment of Christ, and then there's the full surrender. And I think I needed that full surrender. I sometimes I got caught up so much in ministry, between being a preacher and youth leader and minister. I got so caught up in that aspect of ministry that I really lost focus on what my first ministry was, my marriage, and then other aspects, right? I'm very grateful for the season, because it built us up in my marriage, but it also built me up in our business, to really bring back to why I started in real estate, and I'm being focused for it, and it's to truly empower people. And I'm excited for what's coming, really.
Dude, this is fantastic. We have Really Happened said, how refreshing to hear such honest, raw, and open talk about the struggle of marriage. Hey, that's what we're all about. We have to be transparent. We got to be real with people. It's a very powerful thing. Now, and congratulations, it's a son or a daughter you have?
Son.
Dude, I know. I have 4 of them. Well, my second one had a liver transplant. My last one, my boy, I was a girl dad for years, and I finally had my boy, but he came early as well. And can you talk about what you went through with having your child?
Well, I mean, so my wife announced our pregnancy on Thanksgiving of last year, and so within a week we were in the hospital. I was working for this company. I had to go see a client out in Pennsylvania, and she gives me a call. She's like, I'm not feeling so well. I was like, hold up, I'll be there in it's a 3-hour drive. I'll be there in 2.5 hours. Right, I'm gonna find 30 minutes somewhere, and we'll take it to the hospital locally, right? St. Peter's Hospital here, which was itself was God, right? Because her gynecologist was in Somerset, so we were supposed to go to Somerset hospital over there. And we ended up going to here to St. Peter's in New Brunswick, and we drive down. I'm like, all right, they're just gonna tell you you're dehydrated. My wife hates drinking water, and I'm the opposite, right? I drink a gallon of water a day, and she's like drinking.
That's it.
And she's over here drinking, a little cup, and she says that's how I drink my water intake. Then as we go in there and we find out she's 3 centimeters dilated. I'm like, what does that even mean? I was like we just hit the second trimester. Like, what do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
So then all the emotions you could possibly feel, Shawn, literally rushed through you, man. Doubt, right? For a quick moment. And again, that community of accountability, right? First thing I did, I stepped out before my wife could see me break down, right? Because I was trying to be the strong pillar of my marriage because she's already worried. I walk out, I call these men, and we literally just start praying. And I walk in, head up high, and I'm like, it's going to be okay. Perfectly fine. What do we have to do? Oh, well, you're going to have to stay in here. And they tell she, they're trying to get as much magnesium and steroid in her just so the baby's lungs could be stronger. All right, cool. We go to that first 24 hours, find out, hey, listen, she's not advancing. They're just going to keep us in long term. So they say, listen, you may stay here, for a month or two. I say, all right, great. I want to start working. Go home. I was like, we're spending Christmas and New Year's here, babe. Let's get a tree. I got some stuff. And I set up my desk up there. And then, we slept there that night. And then the next day, that night, it just was coming. So we ended up going back to L&D, and she started having contractions. And then later on the next morning, my son shows up. And he just, and the first thing that the NICU tells us, right, and everybody around us, it's going to be okay, but you're going to see a lot of people in here.
Yeah.
Granted, I do have another son, an 11-year-old from a previous relationship. But for me, this was brand new, right? It's 11 years ago, and I'm saying, so for me, I'm like acting like the first time dad,
Yeah.
And so the lady goes to us, when he comes out, don't expect him to be screaming, or crying. He may not. We might have to, pump him with the air, put him on oxygen. And it's like, well, I know the God I serve. And my son's gonna come out screaming. He's actually going to come out fighting. Lo and behold, my son came out fighting. Still holding on to his mother's they're pulling him out. He's holding on to his mother's catheter, and they're literally like, the kid is like grappling it. Like, I'm talking about like grappling it, man. And they had to like pry his hands off, and and he's screaming. Right? He is scream crying. It's very faint, right? Because his lungs are not as strong, as big and strong, but it's faint. And at that moment, I see this little peanut, right? He's 19 centimeters and 2.5 pounds, and long but small. And I'm just like, wow, Jeremiah, like, you came at such a time as this for a reason. And I'll be honest, we saw in the 3 months that we were in the NICU, we saw a lot of people, in different depressive modes, right? You could see in their faces,
right?
And people just asked us, like, why did we always smile? Like, why did we feel this part of joy? And I didn't understand it until, I was studying about it, and there's a difference. Joy is not a feeling. Joy is not a feeling.
Yeah.
Joy is a state of being. Right? You can feel happy, but joy is a state. It's a current state of being, right? And that's where we were at, right? We were joyful. We were joyful that our son was alive, and that we got to see something that nobody else gets to see. Right? We got to see him develop. We got to see him grow. We got to see what was happening inside the womb in front of our eyes. We got to see the miracle, right? His first real cry, his first, coming off of oxygen, his, all those things that like his fingernails really growing in, right? His color changing. It's just, it was, don't get me wrong. Was it tough, for 90 days? Yes. 90 days where I gained about 50 pounds. Yeah. Because that's what was settled, right? Eating late, getting out of the hospital at 10:30 at night, and the first thing you want to do is go eat something because you're hungry, right? Because
you were focused on him. That's what you were doing.
Yeah, that's it. But God is good, right? We were able to bring him. His due date was originally March 15th, which is my wife's birthday, and he got to come home March 14th, day before her birthday. And the greatest feeling in the world was to see my wife on her birthday, wake up her eyes and have her son next to her. And, it's just remarkable to see how much he has grown. And, they told us that we shouldn't worry about him, and his weight. He's going to be delayed in his weight and his upbringing, a little bit of the stuff. And it takes about 1 year to 2 years, but God is so good. On the 7th month, my son was at his ideal weight, ideal structure and development, and he caught up at the 7th month. So to see my 7-month-old at his ideal weight and ideal height and truly developing and having all the cues, right? Eating foods and starting to push himself, like to crawl and holding himself up. It's just to see those cues and know that my son is progressing. All I can say is, wow, God, just wow.
No, thank you for sharing. I definitely feel the same way. It's an experience that people say, oh, it'll be okay. They don't really know. You don't know if it's going to be really okay. You had the situation, my son, same thing. My daughter, who had the liver transplant, a 12-hour freaking procedure, how scary this stuff is. And I had to be that strong one. I had to be that pillar of strength. And I was the one smiling. I was always doing video, and people are like, why would you share this stuff? Because people don't. And that's the problem. They need to understand there's people going through things every day that we have to be able to share and be honest and upfront. And those that are watching, if you need someone to talk to, reach out to either one of us, because it's going to be we're a hand, we're an ear, we're here to listen. That's the goal. And the 50 pounds, man, that's something that
I'm already down later. 30, man. That's not a problem.
Fantastic, man. That's
Taekwondo and all that. That's the that's another, that's a whole other aspect of my journey, right? But yeah, I mean, I went from 400 pounds, prior to you knowing me, I used to weigh 400 pounds. 18, I weighed 400 pounds, and I dropped down to about 220. And then I kind of gained a little bit back. I'm at 265 right now, 270. So the fact that I'm focused on dropping, Gotten very active doing taekwondo for a couple of months, and just grinding, right?
You could see the passion, you could see the energy. You got it, man. Like you have the fire.
Thank you.
And here's something I never really talk about ever on any of these things. How do you feel about the news today? This is something I've been thinking about. Like, do I want to go down this path? I do. I want to find out.
I mean,
what do you
Shawn,
think?
That I'm glad you're going down that path, right? I think there needs to be more, and it's kind of where I'm going with, my podcast is it's not as elite as yours, right? But it's more to talk about real time. And I think let's talk about the news, right? Locally, I mean, it's a little upsetting, right? Seeing certain aspects of. Listen, I'm a person. I love everybody, right? I love every person, but I believe that certain agendas shouldn't be pushed. It should be something more of a choice at home, right? We're talking about the whole fatherhood aspect of stuff, right? And bring the man back to where he has to be. But when there's so many different avenues, you create chaos. I'm a firm believer that there's so much chaos that you can't actually see what matters. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Instead of, it's like we're being blinded by the chaos, so we don't see the reality of what's really happening. The dollar losing its value.
Right.
What I mean?
Right.
I mean, you're talking about we're more focused on indicting a man, versus the fact that our dollar lost its value, or the fact that most recently a young man from the United States Army who was patrolling the DMZ in South Korea somehow decided to run to cross into North Korea, and he's currently nobody knows where he's at. I mean, it's things like that we're not even seeing because it's not, it's unfortunately media has become such a
It's like
chaos.
one-sided. Depends on what you're watching.
And even both sides, right? They
Right.
there's so much more emphasis on the chaos and then the drama versus the actual reality, the truth of what news is, right? I speak to one of my buddies, Adam Elias, who's currently running for assembly district down here in New Jersey, and he talks about how the greatest generation, and the greatest generation is obviously the generation of the world wars, right? And the reason why they're claiming this greatest generation is because they put all political views aside and they saw the commonwealth of the people, right? They finally were they at that point in their lives, they were so focused on the people versus their own personal agendas. And unfortunately, what's happening is that there's such a division amongst Americans that I it's like reminding everybody, and I know this might be a sore subject, but remind yourselves of where we were in September 11th, how we united then.
Yep.
Right. How one day it's like we allowed tragedy to unite us, and now we're allowing chaos to divide us. So the news, I'll be very honest, I'm very selective on watching news. More so because I always said the weather people were the liars, and unfortunately now I don't even know who to believe. I believe more the weather people now. I mean, they've been more on point.
Oh yeah.
But it's upsetting, Shawn. You know what I mean? Even when you talk about, let's talk about insurances, right? There's so many laws being passed by insurance because people have, New Jersey, right? Let's take for example, our premiums are going up so high, right? Compared to what it was before, and a lot of it's because of those claims. What is that? Safe Flight?
Yep.
And listen, I'm not trying to get canceled. Sorry. I'm not trying to get canceled here, right? But that whole Safe Flight, you get a chip, they'll deal with the insurance. Yeah, but we don't understand is that now raises across the board a claim, right? And that claim now eventually is gonna bottle down into more issues for you in insurance premiums. And it's unfortunate, right? That they were led to that point, but because someone made it so easy, they didn't give you the fine point that's actually going to affect you. I have friends of mine that right now like, hey, listen, I can't even get renewed insurance. And I'm like, how many times have you replaced that windshield? Oh, well, every time it chips. I'm like, well, that's a problem right there. I mean, because you live in Jersey, it's gonna happen. I mean, I lived with a chip on my car for 2 years. I mean, I was like, either I change it or myself and pay for it myself, or I get it, replaced by the insurance. And I'm like, I hate claims. I probably had one in my 10 year of driving because I was about to date myself. In my 10-year driving, I have probably did one claim, and it was because I was driving in Connecticut and I hit a girl, like she just didn't merge fast enough, and I tapped her rear end, like a reared her a little bit,
Mhm.
and that's the first and only claim I've ever done. And even to this day, like I feel like that's what's still hurting me, like and it's 5 years ago, right? But all before that, like I'd rather take care of myself. If someone rear-ended me or scraped me in the parking lot, I'd rather go get the body work myself and deal with it myself. Like I tell people, even in homeowners insurance, I say be very careful with getting that covered by the insurance. Well, that's why we have insurance for. It's like, yeah, but at the same time, like your premium then takes a hit, right? There is also other. I mean, you could go more in depth into that, Shawn.
It's all catastrophe. It's
Yeah,
really, it's not for maintenance. And that's what people think. And it's
yeah,
something that people don't realize. And we can go on. And I love talking to you. You're a wealth of knowledge. There's lots of more information. We're going to probably have to do a segment number 2, because I
I'm
know our
down.
time is cutting short anyway. But those that are popping in, don't forget to hit that share button, hit the like button, see the description. You'll see Sam's information. Reach out to him. If you need someone to talk to, if you're feeling depressed, you could call either one of us. I'm here to help you as well. That's what I want, to make sure we all grow together. And it's important that, take some time, check out Sam's stuff. He is a great guy. He definitely will, pick up a phone call from anyone. I know he does that. And
Yeah.
Sam, I thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, that's Sean. I appreciate it. And listen, as I kind of develop my podcast, I would love to have you on as one of my first guests. Really talk about your story, right?
Yeah.
I think Sean, you do this when you talk about, you really try to get us to talk a little bit. I want to know a little bit more about Sean's story, right? What Sean went through with obviously, and just bring that perspective. And the Lions Den will eventually be launched again.
It's manifesting right now. There we go.
There you go. The Lions Den will be launched again, and I look forward to have you on there, Sean. And I greatly appreciate it. And listen, keep me in touch when you want part 2. I'm down. And thanks again.
Fantastic, man. Thanks so much, guys. We hope you have an awesome rest of your day.